Mayor, you may proceed.
Thank you, Max. Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, November 8th, 2021. This is a virtual workshop meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9:05 a.m. With that, we're going to do the roll call. Commissioner Tim Bennett.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Susan Gay.
Here.
Commissioner Ed Chernowski.
Here.
Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree.
Here.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, there I am. And Mayor Mills is here, so we have a full complement, and we're able to formally conduct business because we have a quorum here. Thank you for being here. I'd also like to point out that with us today is City Manager Sharon Lynn, City Solicitor Glenn Mandalis, Public Works Director Kevin Williams, Project Coordinator Evan Miller, Communications Specialist Lynn Cohen, and IT Department Max Hamby and gang, and also Ann Womack, City Secretary. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to thank all the virtual watchers as well as those that came in today in person. I also want to thank those that have not come in person but have registered to speak. And those persons are Carol Everhart of the Chamber of Commerce, Rick Perry, and the others that signed up are here to speak. We've got David Mann from the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society, and possibly or hopefully Greer Manival, and Dan Slagle of the Main Street Group. With that, I want to go to remind everybody that support documents, when they are available, they are embedded into the agenda and available online on the city's portal. I would like to make a note of a couple changes. Under old business, under the county initiative that's next to last, I have decided and have scheduled a special meeting for Monday, November 15th, beginning at 2:00 p.m. For the specific purpose of discussing the county initiative. If you recall, they want to purchase some of the capacity of the ocean outfall that we own and manage. And they are willing to come here and make a presentation and answer some questions for us. And at that time, the commissioners can receive any other additional information from our own city staff, as well as ask questions of the county and our staff. So what that means is we will still have the topic on our agenda today. If any commissioners or the public want to say something, I will say at that time that, again, I want to solicit questions from the commissioners and questions from the public that we can pass on to not just our staff, but the county staff. So I'll give them a heads up so they can prepare for that meeting. So yes, while we will have that topic today, you may choose to abbreviate any comments until we hear from the county. Additionally, you'll notice on the trash talk and solid waste talk that that there is a fifth, 4 out of the 5 proposed amendments are in this agenda. The fifth one is a new proposed section of the code that relates specifically to fees and recycling. And that is purposefully not on this agenda because we want to devote more time to it. That will be put on the workshop agenda for December 6th at 9 a.m. So we will start off with that topic so we can have plenty of time for us and the public to comment on it. With that, I want to indicate that correspondence received, some of it was received late, not able to be embedded in the agenda. Mike Strange et al., for instance, and they will be embedded after the fact, but we want to acknowledge those that they are received. With that, we'll go to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners, members of the public who are participating today. We have begun, the police department has begun an early campaign to hire seasonal officers. We have a very nice brochure, little postcard here. Can't get it in, but soliciting those who might be interested. So these are being put out everywhere we can think of, and Chief is soliciting through colleges and universities here, Pennsylvania, and surrounding states. So hopefully we'll get as many as we can on an earlier basis. Budget meetings with department heads will start soon, next week, and continue into the first week of December. So we're gearing up for preparing the budget for the mayor and commissioners' first review, which will be on January 3rd this year. Outdoor dining permits have expired, so we remind the businesses temporary permits to provide outdoor dining spaces on public property did expire October 31. As far as projects, we have continuing work on the water main and service line installation on Olive Avenue. That's expected to be completed by the end of this week, and work is expected to begin on Maryland Avenue next week, starting Monday. Curb and sidewalk work on Lake Drive and Surf Avenue has finished up, and work will move to Olive Avenue for that work soon. Preliminary work has begun on adding 2 family restrooms and 7 changing stations to the Delaware Avenue Comfort Station. The station will be closed until the work is completed. That's expected to continue until about Easter of 2022. The city is a collection location for toys for tots donated to the U.S. Marine Corps program for Toys for Tots. We're accepting unwrapped toys and books. They can be dropped off in located boxes in City Hall and also in the police department lobby through December 18. And this year, the city's community Christmas tree will be donated by Tammy and Rick Smith. They have a home off of Munchie Branch Road. With the assistance of J.L. Briggs and Company, Plummer and Son, and Delmarva Power, the 35 to 40-foot evergreen is scheduled to arrive at the bandstand next Wednesday, November 17th. The city's annual tree lighting and holiday sing-along event is at 6:30, the Friday after Thanksgiving on November 25, and the fire department's hometown Christmas parade will be on Monday, December 6, starting at 6 p.m. We had a very successful auction this past Saturday. A lot of people showed up inside the convention center and also outside. Sounds like all of the vehicles were successfully sold. There were 19 vehicles, and that includes a John Deere Gator and a Polaris. So we had a successful event. We don't have the tally yet. I'll report on that as soon as we're able to get that. And that's it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions for the city manager? Commissioner Sharp, please.
Yes, thank you, City Manager. That information is always very helpful. And I'm so pleased to hear about police recruitment starting. I have one question about that. Since I was noticing Wicomico County is going to the length of doing television commercials, it struck me that I'm wondering, what is the level of competition that we've got with all of the other coastal towns? Do we happen to know how many folks we lose to the competition, or do we gain from the competition if our benefit packages are better?
Yes, so it is competitive. The chief tells me every year that, you know, we fight, if you will, to get seasonal officers. And for your information, we do a public service announcement. We started that last year, and we'll continue to do that this year. It's competitive, so I know for a fact that Bethany Beach last year increased their hourly salary. We did the same, and looks like they're increasing it again this year. So we'll try our best to keep up with that. Certainly, you know, Rehoboth Beach is the place to be if you're a young, up-and-coming individual interested in law enforcement, because you get the best experience here with the most people and the most activity. So we'll continue to do our best to strive to get as many folks, and we're doing that earlier, as I said.
And I have another follow-up. It goes back to our public meeting last Thursday on the accidental overflow that we had. I am sorry I did not ask at that meeting, what is the cost? Have we got a handle on what the cost is of that overflow? And I'm curious if there were other consulting firms or anybody else involved in the work that's transpiring out at the treatment plant. So
You were
interested
fading
in
off
the
there,
cost.
Commissioner, at the end. If you can please talk a little louder. Thank you. I heard your first part, that we don't have a cost analysis yet. What was the second part?
I was curious if there were any other consultants or contractors that were involved in this, just for the public's knowledge.
The Director of Public Works is requesting that you be a little more specific. Was it the cleanup?
Well, there's city staff, and then my question is, were there other contractors on site? Because you explained that there's construction going on, and I'm curious as to, was there any other involvement by contractors or any other entities?
Commissioner, are you asking about the cleanup itself or the folks doing the work out there?
I'm talking about the accident. I'm talking about the not about the cleanup, because I'm sure we may have had to get some, may have required some additional resources. I'm asking about the accident and the oversight.
So it happened at whatever, 12 or between 12 and 2 in the morning. So no one was on site, if that's what you're asking. We do have contractor involved in the reconstruction of the plant. Prime contractor is Ronca Construction. And we have our consultant construction managers who are on site, you know, during the day, but they were not on site in the evening time when the event happened. And the cleanup was all an in-house staff cleanup. No one else was involved in the cleanup.
Okay, and so city manager will have the costs at another meeting?
Yes, correct. As soon as we have that, we'll get that to you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Legree, please.
It's budget time, and we may not even talk about it, but city manager, could you think about maybe figuring out and talk to chief and talk to Captain Giles? Maybe we could authorize a housing allowance for our beach patrol folks and our police folks that we hire for the summer. I think housing is one of their biggest stumbling blocks, and we could do a housing allowance pretty quickly until we got something permanent going or made some other decisions down the road. I think that would make us much more attractive to folks coming to work here. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Anybody else? We have Tim Bennett and then Tony Sharp again. Go ahead, Commissioner Bennett.
Yes, good morning. I was at Sea-Witch was a great weekend, as everybody knows. I had a couple of residents ask me about the Grove Park dock, and I was just wondering if we had an update on it. Specifically, people wanted to know how it could be used, when it could be used. Was there a water taxi? I had said to one group that I didn't think it was happening soon, and then another group wanted to have an argument about it, whether we were going to be running a taxi between Dewey and Lewis. And I went on the website to try to figure it out, but I'm just thinking we need to either communicate that with the public, or I'm wondering where we are with the dock as to the uses for the public. I wonder if we have an update on that.
Certainly. Commissioner, we started this process in the spring, and we had some issues with the agreement. We had to go through the Army Corps and the museum, and I can certainly provide you with that detailed of information before you came on. It wasn't until late September when we buttoned everything up with the Army Corps and the museum, and I've been in touch with the folks who run the water taxi service from Lewis to Rehoboth and back to Lewis. And they have, they really put a hard stop on it based on the weather and the time of the season. But I'm sure in the spring they'll get back into action there. We have signed on an agreement with Cape Water Taxi as the sole service that will provide that back and forth water taxi. And I think other than that, there has been considerable use over the summer months with just private entities and folks who wanted to go out there with their kayak. So next spring, I anticipate a more robust season for the water taxi. But the city's,
I know you guys have a lot on your plate. I'm just wondering if maybe we can eventually put something on the site or whatever, just so the public can go there and look and see because somebody asked about kayak rental and we're gonna have bicycles. I know we've talked a lot about stuff. I'm just wondering if we can because I didn't have the answers. And so I'm just wondering if we can have a place where we can send people as to what all the different offerings that the dock will provide for the public. So that's all. Thank you.
certainly, we'll take a look at that.
Commissioner Sharp and then Commissioner Gay.
I'll pass.
Thank you, Commissioner Gay, for the city manager.
Actually, Tim's question sparked a couple of questions in my mind, and that is, the last, I guess I heard that we'd sent the contract to the Army Corps, but I'm assuming it's all been signed now?
Yes, it was all buttoned up in late September.
Okay, and did I hear you say that a contract has already been signed with Cape Water Taxi for 2022?
That's correct.
Starting
Starting in the spring when the weather's, back to,
So no specific date, but just starting whenever they start their next season?
yes, correct. And he usually starts, sometime in the beginning to mid-May.
Okay, all right, thanks.
If there's no other questions, then we'll go to the next topic. City Solicitor's report, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. I just wanted to give a quick update on the hand chair case. If you recall, that's an American with Disabilities Act case that questions whether the city has adequate accessible parking on Rehoboth Avenue. Last Friday, we had a full day of mediation. This is in federal district court. I want to thank Sharon Lynn, Evan Miller, Kevin Williams, our engineering consultant, Lenny Masadi, who spent the whole day pretty much mediating this. It didn't resolve, but we made serious progress. The judges kept it in a mediation stance, and we'll come back together to hopefully resolve the case. But just wanted you to know that it's ongoing, but I think we're making progress in resolving it. Any questions on that?
If not, thank you, Glenn. With that, we'll go to committee reports.
Mayor?
Yes,
Mayor?
yes, Commissioner Sharp.
I did not have a question on what Glenn was talking about, but I do have a question. And it's about the Santa house, because I'm gearing up for the holidays, which I think all of us are probably thinking about them. And I am just wondering, do we have all the T's crossed, all the I's dotted, memo of understanding, whatever the proper terminology is for the Santa house and anything that goes with it since the arrangement with the chamber?
Yes, Commissioner. I've been in touch with Carol Everhart actually over the weekend and last week a bit. We do have a memorandum of understanding with the chamber that's being circulated, and we'll have that signed, if not today, by tomorrow. We will be assisting, the city will be assisting in delivering the Santa house and having that set up midweek this week. So yes, everything is ready for that.
Okay, so everything will be buttoned up before it's delivered.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then, Mayor, I have a question as well.
Commissioner Gay and then Commissioner Gossett for the city manager.
Well, it's a question for the city solicitor. I was a little perplexed by the public notice that went out about an appeal hearing that we have coming up on our meeting on November 19th, because it didn't make reference to the fact that it's an appeal of the Parks and Shade Tree decision in March. And therefore unless one happened to know it, which I just coincidentally did because I remembered the case. And so I'm wondering why that is. It makes it sound like that we're hearing this for the first time when really it's an appeal of the Parks and Shade Tree decision. Why wasn't that noted?
I'm not familiar with the Commissioner, I'm not familiar with that particular notice. I may have reviewed it. I will look back at it and get it to you. Now, I will say that my understanding is that this appeal is being conducted as a de novo appeal rather than an on-the-record appeal. As you know, there's two different ways you can do an appeal. One is on the record, where you look at what in this case, the Parks and Shade Tree Commission did, and was there substantial evidence to make the decision they made. Another way is de novo, where the case is basically heard anew. The language of the language of the comprehensive tree ordinance is really thin, to be quite honest, and it uses the word, I believe, hear the case. So it suggests that it should be conducted as a de novo hearing. Now, I will say that in the past, we've done them as on-the-record hearings. So that was a decision that I was asked to make. And I think the better reading of it is that it's to be a de novo hearing. It may be something that the commissioners want to take up. If you recall, that language dealing with appeals relates all the way back to before we actually had a comprehensive tree ordinance. So the language is basically one sentence that dealt with Article 1 of the tree ordinance, which was just the Parks and Shade Tree Commission before it was conducting appeals of the comprehensive tree ordinance. So I don't think it was contemplated at the time that you'd be having these sorts of appeals under that language. But I do think that the best reading of it is that it should be a de novo hearing.
Well, the only right we have is to review the conduct, acts, and decisions of the Parks and Shade Tree. That is the only thing we can do. So call it, I don't know whether, it doesn't matter to me whether the words spoken are different from the words spoken in March, but I understand there's no time frame on here. So we're reviewing a decision that was 8 months ago, but I have to assume that there's no new information to come in because we can't consider that. We can only review, it says very clearly, we can only review the conducts, acts, and decisions of the Parks and Shade Tree.
So I don't think we should get into the details of sort of the legal side of it. I'll be happy to prepare a memorandum that, sort of a confidential memorandum that was discuss these issues, or I could have a private conversation with you, Commissioner.
I just want to clarify that that's what we're doing at that hearing, that we are reviewing the appeal that was before the Parks and Shade Tree on March 22nd.
That's correct. And if it makes sense to supplement the agenda to make that clear that it's, an appeal of a hearing that was conducted by the Parks and Shade Tree Commission, that may be appropriate.
Yeah, I think that would be clear. Thank
Okay.
you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Commissioner Gossett?
Yes, and it can relate to either the city manager or city solicitor. Has there been an actual bill of sale prepared for the Santa House so that the monetary exchange that's outlined in our code or updated policy is taken place or will take place?
Yes, that's included in the paperwork that was exchanged with the chamber. So there's a nominal fee for that of $1. And again, we're finishing up that paperwork, and we'll have that by the end of today or tomorrow.
And does that memorandum of understanding also outline the staffing of the Santa House?
Well, it outlines what was in the agreement, including the maintenance by the city and the contributions, if you will, by the chamber if they wish to do so, not in excess of $10,000. So that is in there following the agreement.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll end that section. Committee reports. I have received no oral reports. I don't recall anybody asking to speak. Nobody's signaling me now, so the next thing we'll go to old business. The first item of old business is to discuss the offer from Tom Ibach for the city to take possession of the iconic Dolles sign currently installed on the roof of the old Dolles Candyland location, which of course is on the northeast corner of Rehoboth Avenue at the Boardwalk. Kevin, or Evan Miller, you have PowerPoint you can put up for me, please?
Mayor Mills,
Yes, ma'am.
before we get into this, could you just clarify that the information that was talked about back in September on this, about the feasibility study, the cost and liability, that's going to be part of our discussion today?
Yes, ma'am.
So we've got the cost and everything. Because the reason I'm asking is I studied the support document and I did not, unless I missed it, I did not see any of that.
Well, we got everything from Rogers Sign Company on Saturday.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are we ready to begin? Thank you, Evan. Next slide, please. Just a reminder of what we're talking about. We're talking about the large sign on top of the building at the corner there, northeast corner of Rehoboth, and the Boardwalk. This sign measures approximately 35 feet in width. The height, I believe, I've gotten different recommendations, but I believe the overall height from the roof to the top of the L is about 26 feet. The height from the bottom of the saltwater taffy ribbon flourish for the S to the top of the L is about 17 feet approximately. Next slide. So some of our discussion outline is going to be the following. And again, this support document was in your embedded in the agenda. The donation criteria, I wanted to refresh your memory. And this is an offer from the owner of the Dolles sign, Tom Ibach, who also owns Ibach's Candy Store. And his offer is to donate the sign to the city. The city is to pay for the cost of removal from the roof and then, of course, future maintenance costs. The sign needs to be removed off premises in entirety by the end of the year. The caveat he wants is that we return the sign to him should the city no longer be interested in ownership. So to clarify, what ownership options we have are the ownership option would be the city of Rehoboth Beach, or he would also offer it to the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society Museum. I did have a business approach me in town and said they would be willing to put the sign on their roof. And when I approached Mr. Ibach, he said absolutely not. The offer was to the city or to the museum and not to another entity. So while we were thankful for that, we had to turn that down. The suggested relocation items submitted, as you recall from previous meetings, were a roof mounted on the museum, facade mount on the museum, ground mount in Grove Park, and the costs of the city are a part of this formula, of course. Cost of the city, I thought, would be based on ownership. Of course, if the city owned the sign in entirety, then there would be one cost factor. But if the museum owned the Dolles sign, then the onus would be on them to maintain it and pay for it. Of course, there could be, some of the decisions could be to retain ownership or support donation to the museum. In other words, the Board of Commissioners could decide to own the sign in entirety and dictate where it goes and pay for maintenance and removal and reinstallation. They could also choose to support donation to the museum. Whether to contribute or not to the removal, reinstallation, or maintenance costs would be up to the commissioners. if they want to do anything, especially if the museum has decided to take it. So there were a couple questions posed by commissioners at the previous meeting. And I don't know if, did Greer, looks like Greer and Dan Slagle of Main Street didn't get on. And that may be my fault, but we've got liaison Commissioner Ed Chernowski to answer some questions for us that, again, were posed at the last meeting. And those questions are on the next slide. Of Main Street. At a previous meeting, a commissioner asked, Main Street indicated they supported preserving the sign. What does that really mean to Main Street, and how would they execute that? Commissioner Chernowski, would you like to respond on the behalf of Main Street, please?
Sure, Mayor. When this issue first came up, the Board of Main Street very broadly said that, they support preserving the sign and would help facilitate that in any way that they were asked to by the city or by the museum. I know that they have looked to see if there's some grant opportunities to help with the funding aspect of it. They also said that they'd be willing to help fundraise should that be required. They also came up with a few ideas. Instead of putting it up on the museum is certainly one idea, although some expressed some concerns that might be confusing to folks coming in the town. And also offered a suggestion that if it was placed ground level, perhaps on the bank of the canal, sort of behind the museum or behind the Main Street building, it could be a specific selfie station, a destination, if you will, for people visiting town to go take selfies at. Those were just a few sort of broad discussion points. So without being too specific and without that time knowing the cost or having the feasibility study done, Main Street's willing to help in any way that they can to the city or the museum. And like I said, either finding some grants to help pay for it or fundraising efforts, they're willing to help.
Thank you, Commissioner. I also talked with Greer and Dan, and just to reiterate and confirm that they indicated on behalf of Main Street that they are not interested in taking possession of it and paying for it and taking responsibility for all future maintenance. However, they are willing, as you mentioned, to help with fundraising and making suggestions as to where it goes. Are there any questions of Commissioner Chernowski on behalf of Main Street? If not, we'll go to the next set of questions posed by a commissioner, and that had to do, that's on your slide there. It had to do with a memorandum of understanding with the museum to address ownership, maintenance, and responsibility for the sign, whether it be the Historical Society or Main Street. Would the city be gifting the sign to the Historical Society? Or would the sign still be owned and have to be maintained by the city? And what would it be the agreement with the sign and its placement with respect to one of the three placements options: on the roof, on the facade, and on the ground? I have with me David Mann, president of the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society and the museum. Are you there, David? Unmute yourself if you...
I am here, Stan.
Very good, very good. Maybe, so do you want to start with the slides that show the situation?
I think it would be a good idea to just show people the lay of the land, particularly the roof.
All righty. David is going to address questions posed by Commissioner Gossett, and they have an interesting proposition. But let's go to the next slide. This slide is just a reminder that they already have, museum already has one Dolles sign, historic Dolles sign that was mounted on the exterior brick and it's already been fully restored and installed in the stairwell out at the museum there. The next slide, again, is just a reminder that the size and scope of this project, it is a big sign, 35 feet wide, about 26 feet high. Notice all the metal work that helps keep it together, keep it vertical, including the back bracing. Next slide is just so you can see the back side of the sign and all the bracing required to keep it up. The next slide, and feel free to jump in there, David. Next slide is an aerial of the roof area.
This is the critical slide in terms of the structure of the building. So the roof has 3 sections. The side at the bottom of the picture is over the Papa John Theater, which is sloped and is extremely strong. And as per Lynn Rogers, we could park a tractor trailer up there. The west side, next to the little atrium tower, is sloped slightly toward the canal, but is constructed of wood versus steel I-beams. Then on the right side, you can see our HVAC cluster. The upper cluster covers the second floor, and the lower cluster, which as you can see is rather aged, and is due to be replaced in the spring, covers the first floor. So we were able to rule out roof placement rather quickly because the only viable place that could handle the static load and the dynamic load would be at the bottom of the picture near the brick walls, which would face east toward the traffic circle, which we did not feel as though would be in any way a welcome to the city of Rehoboth Beach.
Thank you, David. One of the things that when we went on the roof, we thought the directionality of the dolly sign should be facing west, so that as you are coming into the city and approaching the canal bridge that you are able to see it. One of the concerns there, again, that David articulated was that there is a sloped roof above the theater area. However, the other thing that complicated it is the stairwell tower in the front corner there, and that's with the green pyramidal roof there. The next slide shows you that, and the next slide shows you that in order to be seen from those cars coming easterly into the city, it has to be raised above that stairwell, which is about 10 feet high. And the thought was that trying to raise that sign 10, 12, 15 feet high so that it's visible above the stairwell tower was not feasible. So those reasons, and for the other reasons that David gave, the sign company as well as David rejected the thought of putting it on the roof. With that, the next slide is an aerial of the west face that's facing the canal. And you'll see from the next slide, this was courtesy of the Cape Gazette that on their own did an article on the dolly sign and did the renderings. They may or may not be to scale, but it gives you a flavor of what it is, what it would look like on the roof. Again, put yourself over on the Rehoboth Avenue Extended coming into town, and you can see that probably half that sign would be obscured behind the stairwell. So on the next slide is another second rendering by the Cape Gazette folks. Again, it may or may not be to scale, but looks reasonably close as another option. And I think David's going to talk to you about, if you would, David, talk to us about the desires of the Historical Society Board and what they would like to do with the sign, who would take ownership, and which of the mounting options you might be interested in.
We got involved with this project as soon as the director of the museum, Nancy Alexander, read of Tom Ibach's situation with his rent going up and moving down the street. So Nancy arranged to meet with Tom and discuss our willingness to accept literally whatever he had that he felt he would like to donate to us, including the sign on the top of the now former Dolles building. So there's been a lot of conversation about it, and we've gone into great detail with, I would say, number one, we want to protect the structure. The current sign and its current location involved literally removal of the roof and re-engineering of the roof, placement of structure under the roof surface to support the sign, and ended up with a total estimated weight of 3,640 pounds. The roof section that would face incoming traffic to Rehoboth Beach, as I said earlier, is structured with wood. It's truss framing, to be specific. And it would literally have to be removed and replaced in order to handle the load of this sign. And probably what's even more critical is that that space underneath is where our collection is stored, which is of extreme value to the Historical Society. So we didn't want to enter into anything that would put any part of our collection at risk. And knowing the expense of removal and replacement, I wouldn't even want to think about what it would cost to restructure that roof to handle the load. So we're now looking at mounting it on the side of the museum so it can be observed by everyone coming into town. Tom can see it every day when he comes to work across the canal bridge. Just give everyone a sense of it's not gone, it's still here, we're preserving it, which is part of our charter and our mission statement, to let everyone enjoy it, take pictures of it, and smile, which is what we're in the business of doing.
Thank you, David. One of the things I want to make clear is in our conversation, you indicated that the museum was interested in taking full responsibility for the sign. In other words, the city commissioners, if they chose, would not have to fund it at all, or they certainly could contribute. But otherwise, the museum would take full responsibility for removal of the sign, relocating it, reinstalling it, and future maintenance. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then the other thing, so there was a pricing estimate here.
Yes, there is.
And if you would share that approximate price, we did not know this until.
The total
go ahead.
Bill is estimated at slightly less than $30,000. At the east end of Rehoboth Avenue, to remove the structure is approximately $10,000. And then to place it upon the building is approximately $20,000. The initial removal involves 3 bucket trucks and a crane, where the sign would have to be driven down Rehoboth Avenue as a wide load on laying flat on the flatbed trailer to get it down to the museum. It's significantly more expensive to put it back up than it is to remove it. But as I said, there's a tremendous amount of structure up the street that has to be dealt with, including having a welder cut a lot of those pipes loose. The structure, as it was designed when it was originally installed, was intended to be able to withstand 125 mile/hour winds. It's currently been up for in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 years with zero maintenance. So our plan is to preserve it with its current patina, seal it, and then get it back to being a zero maintenance sign.
Thank you, David. Very clear there, and certainly gives us a good option. Would have any questions for David Mann, President of the museum? Commissioner Sharp?
I'm not sure if this question is for Mr. Mann or not, but I'm trying to assess whether or not the city, if the museum were to move forward with their thoughts, Does the city have any liability whatsoever related to the sign?
I would think that there would be an MOU between the city and the museum. Just like any acquisition for the museum, I don't believe we would have any responsibility. Glenn, do you have?
Well, based upon comments of Mr. Mann, I don't think so ultimately. There may be some period of time where we're transferring the sign from Mr. Ibach to the city and then to the museum that we'd, want to look at liabilities. But I think ultimately we will be out of the picture. We won't have any ownership of it. I mean, remember, the building at the location is the city's. So, but I don't think ultimately, if they're taking on responsibility for it, I think our liability will be de minimis, if any.
And that's the reason I asked it, because of the city connection to the building.
Right.
Some might say, well, did we get multiple bids or not? And, if the museum is going to take it over, then I think that's up to them to decide whether they need multiple bids. My personal feeling, having been in the sign business, is that this company is the one that designed it, fabricated it, installed it in place. They have put a lot of effort into figuring how to get it down in one piece versus taking it apart. And putting it back up in one piece. So I would have faith in just going with a single vendor for this, because I think it's a unique situation. David, do you have any follow-up comment?
Having learned a lot about this sign over the past several months, Lynn Rogers and Rogers Sign Company have a national reputation. They do work over the United States. He's involved with NASCAR. He's involved with the Sign Museum in Cincinnati, Ohio. So I can't think of anyone that would be better for us to work with.
Any comments by the commissioners before we go to the public? We've got Commissioner Tim Bennett and then Commissioner Jay Legree. Commissioner Bennett?
Yes, well, I understand the sign is iconic in its current location. Are we sure that's what we want to have people see as soon as they come into Rehoboth?
Do you have an answer?
I just, I know we all love the sign in its current location. It's an iconic sign. It is a business sign, but if that's how we want to welcome people to the city, is that the Rehoboth Beach brand, Dolles? Is that what we want people to see as soon as they come into town? Is that who we are?
We are a museum, and we're in the business of preserving the history, culture, architecture, and special character of the city of Rehoboth Beach. So our taking that sign as an obligation is part of that mission statement. The landscape of the boardwalk is changing. It's going to continue to change. And that space that it currently sits on could well be another hotel. It could be anything. All of those things are going to disappear. That sign is iconic to 3 generations of beachgoers. And we're making the effort to preserve it so they can continue to enjoy it as opposed to having it disappear. When we do a program in the Papa John Theater, we're happy to get 75 people in that theater for one of our programs. We're limited by capacity. When that sign is on the side of our building, we no longer have that limit. We can let everyone enjoy it. And yes, it is a business sign, and we are in the business of signs. We have a sign gallery, which will be introduced at our members meeting at 4 o'clock on the 19th. So it's big, it identifies with a business, but every sign we have in there identifies with a business. It's part of the history of the city.
I agree with everything you said. I don't have fault with any of that. My point just is that the brand of the city? That's all. That's my point. I have no fault with the fact it's iconic. I have no fault that everybody loves a sign. I'm just thinking it really is. It makes a statement for the city that this is who we are. We're not the summer capital. It's Dolles Saltwater Taffy.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Bennett. Commissioner Legree.
The only rendering that I saw, which looked like it would work, as you face the west with the sign on the west side of the building seems to be that rendering that was done by the Cape Gazette using that middle section of the building. Could you go back to that, Mayor?
Sure.
Yeah, I would ask her, because it looks to me like if that sign is more than, if that section of the building is less than 35 feet, and that sign would hang over the edge, that the whole thing wouldn't look good at all. I sure would love to see the exact dimensions of that midsection of the west face of that building. And I expect that that Board President Mann has already measured that. So you probably know that that's more than 35 feet as I ask that question.
Well, Jay, the estimates that I've been given are anywhere from 30 to 35 feet wide. And I have not been permitted on the roof to take an exact on-site measurement on top of the Dolles building.
No, I mean on top of the oh, okay. So,
no one has the exact dimensions
Whoa.
of that sign.
I would suggest right this minute that somebody get up there and measure that sign and make daggone, because the placement that you have there just looks fantastic. And it would be so critical if those measurements were wrong. I do that before we talk again and make sure that sign will fit that hole, because it sounds from your discussion that the roof's out.
The roof is out.
Okay, thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other commissioners?
Yeah, I have a couple questions.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation and your comments, Mr. Mann. I appreciate them. I know there's a lot of historical and emotional attachment to that sign. And I'm just kind of curious in the sense that mounting it on the side there, it's certainly a part of the history of Rehoboth. And if the Historical Society is going to take the responsibility, the financial responsibility to have it mounted or taken off the roof and then moved and then remounted, that's certainly a great thing. I guess in the Memorandum of Understanding or what have you, is it my understanding that it will be accessioned into the collection of the museum, so the ownership then will remain with the institution?
Yes, that is the plan.
Okay. And in doing that, I don't know, just a question, he may not be able to answer it, but is Mr. Ibach agreeable to that? Because initially I think his donation was to the city. So just kind of curious if that has been clarified. Is it a regift or something of that nature? Another question I would have is there been any thought of lighting the sign for once it's installed for that? Obviously that would be an additional cost, but it probably would be cheaper to do it now at the time of installation as to go back and retrofit for lighting, if that's a consideration. And then kind of a bigger question I have, and I don't know whether this sign saving, if you will, would be precedent setting, but you know, Nicola's moving out of town. Does the Nicola sign mean a lot to both emotionally and historically to the city? And you know, Royal Treat is also a very wonderful place. And hopefully it'll be in business for a long time. I just kind of question to look forward a little bit, not deal with the initial reaction and emotional attachment to this, but also just think about forward. If do you have room for additional signs? Do we want to set a precedent with this, or just, you know, is there a policy that maybe the board of the Historical Society wants to think about for the future? I don't.
Nancy's had conversations with Nick Jr. regarding the Nicola signs.
Uh-huh.
And it's my understanding that those signs will be moving up to Lewis.
Well, that's fine. That's understandable as the Dolly sign. They belong to the owner. But I just kind of curious if, you know, the board could take a look at the future and maybe establish a policy of some sort to look at that. Because as you say, the boardwalk will be changing in the next couple of years or 5 years or 10 years. And to have some thoughts of how to manage those situations in the future, I think would be very important. But I am supportive of moving the sign at the cost of the Historical Society. Thank you.
Thank you.
We've also discussed just having Tom gift it directly to the museum to make it a simpler transaction.
I think that would be much cleaner, to be honest with you.
Well, and if you recall, as part of the presentation slides and part of my presentation introduction, I indicated that Tom Ibach was willing to give it to the city, meaning the city or the museum. So yes, that's already been settled. In other words, he would not be interested in giving it to Main Street or another business. I did have one business contact me and indicated, or there was more of a question, putting a Dolles sign on the museum at the entrance to the town appears to be advertising an ongoing business. And they didn't have a comment other than, was that proper? And so I'll pose that to you to answer or not.
Well, I can say that we're not in the saltwater taffy business and have no plans to be.
Thank you, David. Are there any other commissioner comments? Let's go to the members of the public. There is a timeline on this such that by the November regular meeting, we need to make a decision. We either need to cut the bait or go with it because there needs to be time for either the museum or for Tom Ibach to schedule with the sign company to take the sign down. There's a definitive timeline there. So let's go to the members of the public first. We're going to start with those that are here in the anchor room with us. Mike Strange, any comments on Dolles sign? No comment. No. Walter Brenningham, any comment on the Dolles sign? No. Check his hand, no. Carol Everhart, any comment on the Dolles sign? Is she on? I don't see her on. We'll go to the next. Rick Perry, I see you're there. Any comments on the Dolles sign?
No, Mayor, I have no comments on that.
No comments. All right, very good. So is everybody comfortable putting this on for a vote at the November regular meeting? Have we exhausted the conversation here so that we can take a vote? Commissioner Gossett and then
Mayor,
Commissioner
I'm
Sharp?
comfortable with that, but I think if Mr. Ibach is going to donate the sign to the city, or rather to the museum, I don't know what the city's role in it would be other than working out the permission to attach the sign to a city-owned building. So I'm just curious as to if we could have some maybe direction from the city solicitor as to what role the city would play in this if the gift is going to be from Mr. Ibach directly to the Historical Society.
Well, it sounds like Mr. Ibach is focused predominantly on gifting it to the city and then the city making whatever arrangements with the museum are appropriate. So, but I hear your question. I mean, ultimately, we are very much a third party. We own the building and it will be attached to the building, but the mechanics of removing it from its current location and placing it at the new location really is a operation that involves the museum and Mr. Ibach. So I haven't been into the discussions at that level, but I'm sure our involvement does seem limited to the placement of the sign on a city-owned asset and ensuring that any concerns we have as a city and that asset are resolved.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with you that we have to dictate or have a say-so in where it is placed. Although Tim Bennett has a good point. But otherwise, fastening it to the museum has the lease. And if that's part of their collection, they've got a grinding wheel outside in the yard. And we didn't give them permission or not to place that there.
That's not to the physical building. Again, I would ask the solicitor to review the lease with Mr. Mann. I just don't see the city's role in this if it is going to be gifted directly to the Historical Society. other than, again, it's attaching to an asset of the city. These are, I know they're in the weeds questions, but we seem to have a challenge in that area of town of in the weeds and not discovering these things until after the fact. So I would just like to be as clean as possible in entering to this agreement, which I support. But again, we just need to do it the right way.
I think that's very valid, Commissioner. And Glenn, can you look into that?
I will, thanks.
I guess one of my intents of conducting a vote would be to allow the commissioners, if they so choose, to suggest that they would like to fund part of this venture. Commissioner Sharp, did you have a question, please?
I think it's already been answered, but wouldn't any discussion of funding be part of the budget process? And in my opinion, if the city declines this offer, and the museum very graciously is saying they're going to take the financial responsibility, I can't imagine that we would argue that point and try to replace it with taxpayer dollars. So I guess my bottom line is a vote actually required from the commissioners? City solicitor.
You want me to?
Maybe something to think about.
Well, let me confer with the city solicitor, and it may be that we don't need to, or that may be that there's a little element, depending on what his research proves, that we need to do it. Anyhow, we've had allowed the members of the public to talk. Are there any other comments by the commissioners before we go to the next topic? If not, thank you very much, Ed, for conveying Main Street's position. And thank you, David Mann, for being here to share the museum's position. And thank you, commissioners. With that.
Thank you.
With that, we're going to go to the next item of old business, which is discuss operational changes to the collection times for refuse, yard waste, and recycling services, and changing the fee for a yard waste container. Evan, can you put up the agenda just with those 5 items? And enlarge it as best you can there, just on the operational changes. You've got it? Sharon's got it. She'll do it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Commissioners, we've been talking about this for several months, as you know. As the Mayor said, we've left off certain fee issues to be talked about and discussed at another time. These are staff recommendations with the folks who, the operational changes as well as the change to the ordinance, staff recommendations based on those who work with it on a daily basis, Director of Public Works and Jean Lee, who's been dealing with this for several years and speaking with the public and then dealing with the billing cycles. So I'll, again, Mayor, turn it over for any questions as you go line by line and agenda topic by agenda topic here. But just so you know, we've spent hours talking about this, and hopefully we'll have some resolution today.
And again, these are items that I will be putting on the November regular meeting for a vote. It has to do with the operational changes as well as the 4 proposed amendment changes to the code. And we've actually started this back in June. So we've spent a lot of time on it. It's time to bring it to a conclusion. How do you want to proceed? Do you want Jean to present one at a time?
Mayor, also, I'll say that we're on a tighter timeline than we were the last time we spoke about this, as we have a city calendar about to be published. We'd like to be able to put dates and any changes on that, and of course, update the website and send notices out as we need to do. And we usually do by the end of the year. So, yes, if we can just start one by one here.
All right, who has control of the screen? Can you make it a little bigger? Okay, so the first operational change on the agenda is to change twice a week pickup of refuse, the annual end date from November 30th to October 31. Did you want to, you had a support document dated August 3rd. I don't know if you want to reiterate any of that.
So basically with this, all it is we want to cut it, the twice a week pickup, short by a month because, as you can see in the support document, in November, we're only picking up 69 tons of trash total that month. In October is when we really stop picking up our bulk of trash, which is 121 tons. So we are just looking to move our twice a week pickup back to the end of October there. And then that also will play into our loose leaf pickup, which we want to move to the beginning of November, so that we can use our employees in a better fashion with the limit that we have. Instead of doing twice a week pickup and loose leaf, twice a week pickup, the second 2 days of that week, instead of trash, it becomes your loose leaf pickup in November.
So are there any comments by the commissioners on item number 1, which is changing twice a week pickup, the end date?
I do.
And you're going to need this. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sharp?
I have an overall comment of how to dispose of this item. And in my opinion, everything I have heard and seen is insensitive to the residents' needs. It disadvantages our second homeowners. And one way to dispose of this is to not make any changes. I have not come in contact with one individual who finds it enticing that these changes would be made.
Thank you. We'll stay the course and vote at the next meeting, but I appreciate your opinion. Anybody else?
Yeah, I do.
Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, my only concern about this, and I appreciated having the data, and as you say, we've been talking about this for a while, but I have two concerns. One is that even though the average tonnage in November, goes down to 60 some odd, I mean, it was 90 a few years ago, so it sounds like there's actually great fluctuation. So I don't know whether there's any advantage to the average or not, but let's stick with the average. That's still residents or part-time owners, somebody is generating that 70 tons. So they will be at a distinct disadvantage for the month of November because they no longer have their twice a week pickup. But more importantly is Thanksgiving. I feel like if we make the change, there ought to be a special pickup citywide, as I believe it is now, on Friday of Thanksgiving week, because what are people going to do with their turkeys? I mean, I have been asked this question, and it's a serious question. That they're being asked to take them home, to put them in a can for the following week that they can't leave out because they're no longer here. It's an issue that particular week.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other commissioners?
Yeah, Mayor.
Commissioner Chernowski and then Commissioner Legree.
On the same points that Commissioner Gay and Sharp made, do we have data that shows, in my mind, I feel like each year there's more and more people staying here in the off season, and it is becoming more of a year-round town. Do we have data on that 69 tons? Has that increased over the past 5 years? Is it decreasing? Because if we're on an upward trend of it increasing each year, I kind of would shy away from making an operational change like that, but just wanted to know if there's any data.
So the supporting document is actually a chart from 2018. So it shows 18, 19, 20, and then 21 we didn't have yet when we started this. So that data is actually provided in the document.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Legree. You're muted. Start over.
I'm fine. I'm just looking at the numbers, and I was going to ask questions about the numbers, but it's really not it's right here. And I would go with the recommendations of the staff. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll go to the public real quick. I think we can, since we have so few, we can do each one. Mike Strange, any comment on this topic? You'll need to Kevin, can you make sure that microphone's on?
It is.
Okay.
Mike Strange, Forest Oakley, and actually the 4 items on that part of it, I support. And you really have to look at the data in terms of quartiles, not any particular month. You really have to group them into 4. And I realized the statement that was made by a couple of the commissioners. There are some concerns, but aggregately, as a full-time resident, it does seem reasonable and fair when you look at the data in more detail. It may create some complications for folks, no question about that. And I've got some other observations that are related to the financial part of it, but we're not discussing that today.
Mm-hmm. Right, thank you, Mike. Walter? Nothing? Rick Perry, anything specific to this topic? We'll come back to you. Any other commissioners want to contribute anything? Commissioner Legree?
It would seem very simple to just have an extra pickup on Thanksgiving. Would take about 3 more words. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, with that, we'll go to item number.
I also have a comment, Mayor. I agree that if we could incorporate a Friday pickup after Thanksgiving. And do we also have any data with regards to how this would have any impact on the budget? Is this a savings? Is this a neutral move with regards to staffing? Or is it an additional cost?
So I don't have the numbers, but this would take 2 days a week off in November that we would no longer be running our trash truck. So just that in itself, that's 8 days less of trash truck and fuel and dumping at the yard.
So there really wouldn't be a personnel savings, but a, if you will, overhead from the standpoint, as you mentioned, fuel costs, dumping it at the landfill, et cetera. Those would be the costs experienced.
Well, no, I'm sorry. Tipping fee would not change because you're going to pay for it either before or after. So I would say, no, it is the labor that's what's being saved.
But we would still be, those people would still be on the clock, would they not? Are they part-time laborers, or how does that work?
No, what it would do is create efficiencies in the department in the way of not picking up trash specifically on those 8 days that the crews wouldn't be out there. Give them more time to devote to other tasks that they aren't doing on a regular basis with 4 times a week pickup, such as maintenance, such as painting, getting ready for the season. There seems to be, obviously, every year, a big rush. So this would give them additional time to take care of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Commissioner Legree?
Gene, I'm sorry to ask you this because we're out in the weeds and I'm continuing to keep us out in the weeds, but what is our tipping fee per ton?
I have no idea. I would have to go find that out.
Thank you. If it's not much, then all we're out is labor. But if it's something like, and I'm something now, $50, I can't remember what I paid, but it's
80
significant.
Yeah.
I think it's more in the neighborhood of 75, 80. Although
We're talking a significant reduction if it's that much. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, we're going to go to operational change number 2, change free bulk pickup from the last week of April, first week of May to the first 2 weeks of April. So it's moving free bulk pickup. Free bulk pickup continues to be free, but it's moved approximately 3 weeks earlier. Any comments from the commissioners?
Again, I think that this is, we're dealing with a high number of seasonal folks here, and it is problematic to me to change this because this is the way it's always been done. one of the things that I don't see included here, and it certainly can be done sort of after the fact in many ways, is some type of communication plan, or how, if whatever is approved and changes made, of how this will be rolled out to the public and how it will be communicated. But I just think that, people are kind of, depending on Easter, they come down, they clean out the house and this type of stuff. And if this were to pass, I think we also need to communicate that there is an opportunity for a special pickup. There is a charge for that, et cetera. But I haven't seen anything, and maybe it is coming at a later state, but some type of communication plan of how these changes would be shared with our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. I lean toward leaving it alone. I think what we do now gives a lot of opportunity for those to clean up their yard. Otherwise, there's a lot of yards that are going to be disheveled and have debris in them, and they might have to wait one more year till they can get rid of it. So I'm leaning toward leaving it alone. Any other comments before we go to the public? Again, we're going to conduct a vote on this. Mike Strange, anything specific to this? No, sir. Nope. Walter? Nope. Rick Perry, are you back on?
Yes, I am, Mayor. Thank you.
Anything for the first two operational changes?
Yes, Mayor, and I certainly tend to agree with you with respect to the issue that was just being discussed. And I also am wondering whether or not any of these changes to the scheduled pickup makes sense to do at this time, because as I look at the data that has been provided, there are wild fluctuations over the recent period of time, and we have to remember that we were dealing with a pandemic situation, and also just my sense that we do have a growing permanent population of citizens here in the city. A lot of folks bought homes and frankly moved out of the cities because they just didn't feel safe and comfortable there. And I don't know that we have adequately assessed the data of the impact of that change in the composition of and the demographics of our city at this point. And I think it's sort of jumping the gun, so to speak, to make these changes without a complete analysis. And we don't even have November numbers for this year. And so I just think that in both cases, I would not be in favor of making the changes that are being proposed.
For number one and number two.
That's right.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Any other questions by the commissioners?
Yeah, I just have one.
Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, first of all, Sam, I'm glad that you mentioned being concerned about this particular one, because I've had a couple people tell me specifically that they come down in late April to do their clean out. And I think Commissioner Gossett raised a good point too about how people come around Easter. So I looked at the calendar, for instance, for next year, and Easter is on the 17th of April, which means that anyone who comes down then is going to miss it entirely if the pickup has stopped the previous on Good Friday, which is probably not even a work day. So, I think it might vary season to season, but I also think it's just too early for what most people will be needing.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? If not, we're going to go to operational change number 3 for discussion. Change yard waste container and bag collection from first, third, and fifth Wednesdays to every other Wednesday. Commissioner, comment? This actually makes it a little harder, perhaps, for our constituency to understand what days of the week. However, we did it somewhat successfully with recycling and yard waste by publishing a calendar. We would have to just modify the one calendar to be able to show that it's every other week rather than 1, 3, 5. And it really doesn't reduce overall the number of days, I don't think, significantly. In fact, it probably gives us more pickup days overall. Any commissioner comments? Susan, you're shaking your head no?
Well, I don't think it gives us more. I think it gives 2 less, but that's okay. It's less it's fewer pickups with this change.
And I also, personally, I think it may sound simple to do every other Wednesday, but as we experienced a few weeks ago when the change was made, people didn't realize what Wednesday we were or what Monday it was. So I think with having a, if you will, a placeholder of the 1st, 3rd, and 5th, or just the 1st and 3rd, if you want to do it that way, and if we skip the 5th, if that's problematic. I'm just, to me, when you just say every other Wednesday, this may sound very innocent, but when do we start which Wednesday? There's some type of placeholder. That's my concern. And again, that relates back to the communication plan. And if you think it's fine for posting on the calendar, that's fine. And I'm glad to see that the website has made it a little bit easier to find those calendars now because it's on the homepage. But I just, communication and educating our residents is prime if we're going to make these types of changes.
Thank you. Commissioner Sharp, please.
Mayor, could someone remind me what we actually gain from doing this one on yard waste, which I have a number of constituents who tell me that yard waste is unpredictable, pickup of yard waste is unpredictable at best. So exactly what do we gain in the eyes of all of our residents to do this?
So our recycling is already every other week. That was a change a few years ago the Blue Hen made on us. So right now you could be, if you were a second homeowner, your yard waste and your recycling may need to go out on separate weeks. If we can do every other and put it as the same as our recycling, if you're a second homeowner and you need to get this stuff out, you only need to come 1 week because they're going to be on the same week. Your every other recycling and your every other yard waste are going to be that Wednesday and that Friday of that week. So it's to bring it in line with what we have to do for our recycling.
And for those who pay attention and will read the communication and the plan that we'll have in place, it makes, perfect sense to us to do that. But again, if the commissioners, wish to keep it the same, that's up to you.
Any other commissioners have questions? Comments? Commissioner Legree? You're muted.
Nobody wants to hear my dog bark. Whatever we do, we have to just publicize it and send a calendar out to everybody and say, this is it. This goes for the year, and tell everybody instead of having to run back and try to figure out where you are and who picked up what, when, and is it every other week or is it first, you know what I'm saying. So we just got to publicize it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sharp, are you ready to? Nope.
Now, am I ready to what?
Say something again, more. Your hand gestures.
In my opinion, we are quite aspirational when we talk about communicating and educating. This has not worked well. Let me rephrase. I don't think we have any evidence that we communicate well with our community in general. So to hang these kind of changes on a non-existent communications plan, I find is another reason that I feel that this is a very weak approach and it creates complications to a community that I don't know why we want to do that, but that's all I have.
Any other commissioner comments before I go to the public? Let me go to the public. We're talking about yard waste collection days, first, third, and fifth Wednesday versus every other Wednesday. Mike, do you have anything? No comment. Walter, no. Rick Perry?
Yes, just a brief comment. I agree with Commissioner Gossett that, every other Wednesday, what's your start date? I do think the city in recent years has been, doing a good thing by having on the website, the colorful calendar that, tells you which days collections are occurring. I happen to print it out. And so, I can tell you that I refer to it all the time when we start getting into these time periods when we're not doing the regular, twice weekly and every Friday pickups. I think that a lot of people they may not print it out and have it readily available for them to reference. And I think it's confusing to people. And so on this topic, I would stick with the 135, frankly. I think that's more easily understood. And people have that in their minds. I would not make the proposed change. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll go to operational change, proposed number 4, change Monday through Friday loose leaf pickup to Thursdays and Fridays as noted. Any commissioner comments?
My question on this is, we're running the trucks 5 days a week now. And I guess Mr. Williams can maybe give me some insight into this, but running them 5 days a week, reducing them down to 1 day per week, how do we keep up with the volume? Is there a volume that supports a 5-day pickup that we're doing now? And just how does that reduce to 1 day a week?
So, Commissioner, the volume shouldn't change because right now we do it 5 days a week, but we do 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, whatever the designated streets are. So it's not every street 5 days a week. Our move would be to make a more efficient use of our personnel because it ties into going to the 1 day a week on the trash pickup. So then the second 2 days where they would have been picking up trash, now they're going to pick up leaves and they're going to be doing it in those 2 days throughout the entire city. So every customer would still get 1 pickup of leaves a week. We would just consolidate it on Thursdays and Fridays for the entire city.
So I'm sorry, I guess I didn't state my question, but if the crew is out for 5 days a week collecting leaves and they are on all over town, if they're 3 days a week in the north end of town, and now that's all concentrated into 1 day a week, I'm just curious, it seems to me odd that you now can cover 1 day a week what used to take you 3 days a week to cover. Maybe I'm not being clear in my questioning, but it just seems that there's a lot of work being packed into 1 day to efficiently clean up all of the leaves or what have you.
Well, I probably don't agree. So.
Any other comments by the commissioners? Commissioner Bennett?
Yeah, my one question is, and this might just be my neighborhood, but a lot of people that are second homeowners will come down on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They rake their leaves out on Saturday. And so if they're there now, they're not going to get picked up till Thursday. So they could be out for 5 or 6 days and they end up blowing all over the place again. So I'm just thinking that Thursday, Friday is an awful long time period for most people to come down and put their leaves out on Saturday and Sunday.
Noted. We'll have them evaluate that. Anybody else?
Yeah, just.
Commissioner Gay, go ahead.
Yeah, well, and following up on what Commissioner Bennett just said, we got a communication this morning that from a citizen who also pointed out the risk of the yard waste in the street sitting there all week and blowing around and ultimately clogging the stormwater drains. So I think that's a concern as well with our changing weather conditions every week. And I think Commissioner Bennett is right that people are going to be sweeping it out there on Sundays and waiting, some days, and anything can happen during that time. So that's my concern about the timing.
If I could just say one thing, right now, the same people that roll it out on Sunday, they may not get picked up till Thursday or Friday because we don't break it out by north-south. We don't break it out by the entire city. We break it out by several streets each day. So if you're on F Street, you may not get picked up till Friday, every Friday. And if you roll it out on Sunday, it's still going to wait out there for the week. So it's not reducing or extending, for the most part, what people are going to have it sitting out along the curb.
Thank you, Kevin. Anybody else?
Just a curiosity, what's special about Thursday and Friday versus Monday or Tuesday?
Because it's the days of the week that we're not doing trash collection with those same people, right? Monday and Tuesday, they do citywide trash. We would do citywide leaves on Thursday and Friday with that same workforce. This whole thing was set up to try to make our workforce work more efficiently. Wasn't trying to save money, just try to be more efficient use of our workforce. So they can do the other things in those days that they're not out riding around the town on the leaf vac, or the trash truck for that matter.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the commissioners? If not, members of the public, Mike Strange, our topic is loose leaf pickup day of the week.
I have to identify myself again? No. I'm in favor of this one as well. I was in favor generally with all four of them because of operational efficiencies.
Hear Mike.
I'm sorry.
Cannot hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Better.
My comment initially was I was in favor of all four of them, of the proposals, and the particular one for operational efficiencies for the city, under the assumption that a good communications plan is done to do it. And the reason for it was just for that reason, because of operational efficiency, to reduce the net increases in cost that the city is going to have to deal with as time marches on, which is what we've seen occur over the last few years. And they're inexorably tied to what the rate structure is. And so that's going to be a separate discussion. But you can't deal with these four without in the back of your mind thinking about what the ultimate rate structure is going to be. The other comment is with regard to second home ownership, and I'm sure most people have seen it in the city, though the last several years, the number of independently contracted by the homeowner of maintenance services for leaf collection has gone through the roof. You should never use your own street as indicative of the rest of the city. But I now have 3 different leaf collection, lawn maintenance folks that arrive on multiple days of the week to attend to different houses, towing very large trailer trucks to do their work. And that's been growing and growing as a function of the homes keep getting larger. So there's a conflict of things going on here, and I think it's very incumbent upon the city to increase their operational efficiency against the backdrop of all these things that are going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Walter?
Walter Birmingham, 123 Henlipton Avenue. I understand what you're trying to do and not being argumentative about that. But Fridays and Mondays, when it comes to holidays, a lot of times things don't happen. And I think the city is doing a fantastic job of communication. But if you call in on a holiday day, there's no announcement, this is a city holiday. And the communications needs to be improved just for that item. But there needs to be a number that if a person's here without their computer, their phone, whatever, that a queue to get to streets department or to find out what trash collections are. Because if you have a 4-day weekend, you might have Friday and Monday both off in some cases. I'd have to think about that. But you could lose a whole week out of it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think Public Works, I think Kevin and City Manager will do a fine job on that. But there needs to be an easy way to do it without putting a phone load on the people downstairs that they can call in if you'd like to know if trash is being collected today or this week. This is what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Rick Perry, we're addressing leaf pickup days.
Yes, Mayor. I share the concerns that Commissioners Bennett and Gay have expressed about putting this to a Thursday, Friday. I think that it was immediately what I thought when I looked at this proposal as well. Excuse me. And I'm all for operational efficiencies, and I realize that's sometimes very difficult to achieve. But the proposal does ensure that for those who do put their leafs and all out there, they definitely won't be picked up until Thursday or Friday. And I do think that most people, I know my neighbors here, on Pennsylvania Avenue, who do not have, their own landscaping services, put out tons of that, particularly during these months. And they come here on the weekend, and clean out their yards and pile up the leaves and whatever. And so we're ensuring that those leaves and debris are going to be blowing around at least until Thursday. And I just don't think it's a wise move to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Any further comments by the commissioners? If not, we'll go to operational change number 5. Update fee to consumers to charge the going rate for yard waste container. Jane?
Okay, so this one we had listed before to go from $30, because that's what we charge right now for a container, to $50. And then we got an email on October 19th from our supplier that said our yard waste containers are now $70 to purchase. So we definitely need to raise up from the $35 that we're charging. And the mayor and I kind of spoke about this because I let him know when we got this email that instead of putting a fee actually attached to that, just put it as they purchase them at the going rate that we had to purchase them at, because the whole purpose was to cover the cost of the container we were giving them.
Commissioners? We'll go to the members of the public. Mike Strange.
I'm sorry, Mayor,
Go
I
ahead.
have a comment here. I think that, I understand covering the costs of the yard waste containers, but I think this leads to the larger discussion of the pricing that you've postponed until next December workshop, which is fine. But I don't want to get into that aspect there, but I believe we need to look at this holistically in the package of services that we provide, whether it be trash pickup, yard waste pickup, and recycling pickup as a package, and that should be reflected in the annual cost to our residents. And this could be done on a staggered basis as new owners turn in or come to Rehoboth, build new homes or buy their homes, and phase this as a package program in for consumers over the next how many ever years continually that we do this. Again, I think that this aspect perhaps should be included and looked at as that package pricing and the cost of the annual cost of the services provided to our residents.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Or did you want to say,
I just want to
Jean?
say something real quick about putting this as a package. The yard waste containers are not required to be used. This is only if you want one, because you have the loose leaf pickup. That may be all that resident needs, and they never bag anything or put anything in a container. And also they can choose to put out the paper bags and never purchase a container. So I wouldn't necessarily think it would be a good idea to charge everyone in a package deal for this container, because this container is only if you want it, and it's easier for you because there's other options for you to put your stuff out. You do not ever have to purchase this container.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Any other commissioners? If not, we'll go to the members of the public. Mike, anything to do with the yard waste container fee?
Yes.
Stand within an inch of that microphone, if you would.
I'm sorry, what?
Stand within an inch of that
Oh, okay.
microphone. There you go.
With the comment that was just made, I think that's very important as to why you don't do it as a package. The other part is, and I think it's something that should be considered because this is a function of the other waste containers that we're required to do that meet city specifications is how many of these things start accumulating on urban properties in the limits of the city of Rehoboth Beach. Whether you have 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 trash containers or some number, or the same thing with regard to these receptacles. Turns out for yard waste, I do in fact use bags, but that's just me. But I think it's very important to take that into the context, and as Commissioner Gossick pointed out, it's inextricably tied to the finances of this whole operation across these various services. So it's kind of hard to talk about one without organically considering the other thing, even though we're separating them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Walter, anything on price? Rick, anything on price of yard waste container?
Yes, Mayor. I have a question, and I probably should know the answer to this, but if someone wants a yard waste container, are they always given a new container, or are these recycled if they're turned in by a resident?
I'm pretty sure they're given a new container, Mr. Perry.
Okay, well, then I would certainly favor, the going rate. If that is the case, I don't think the city should be at a disadvantage, financially. And I also don't think it should be included as part of a package, because like Mr. Strange, I do the same thing, and I have a landscaping service. And so I don't have, one of the containers because I don't need it. And so, I don't think those homeowners should have to pay, as part of a package for something that they're not utilizing. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Anything further from the commissioners? Well, we've gotten rid of our operational changes. Now we move over to the proposed amendments to our solid waste code, chapter 227. We've got 4 items to go over there. Evan, if you could put on 227-1, the first item, and then do you want to explain
Yep.
what
Okay.
what the changes are there proposed?
So for the definition change for waste container, I just want to make it clear that this is not, if this change doesn't eliminate bags out on the street. This change only changes the definition of the type of trash can you can put out. So we would like to change it so the definition of the trash can you can put out is a tippable trash can and can be tipped by our trucks. That eliminates the big plastic or metal trash cans that our trash guys currently get out there, that they either have to dig the trash out of to make it light enough to tip it, or they're lifting a heavy can. So all this is doing is, if you put out a can, it has to be a tippable can. So the new wording for the definition would be a reusable rigid plastic container with a watertight lid and a tipper mechanism capable with city refuse trucks and used for the storage of recyclables, yard waste, and bagged garbage and refuse. And of course, we would communicate what is that definition, put pictures and examples and things like that in our communication. And we wouldn't say tomorrow you have to have this. We would give them a time frame. So if we vote yes or no on that this month, they would have until next July, when everything changes, to comply with this.
Any questions by the commissioners? Seems rather straightforward.
Yeah,
And
yes,
and
Mayor.
of course, the purpose of the tipping mechanism is to try to save the backs of our personnel.
Right.
Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, first of all, Gene, thank you very much for explaining the time frame for enforcing this, because I'm one of these people that is going to have to get a new can. The 2 non-tipper cans came with our house, and I've never switched out. But we had a discussion early on when several people had raised the concern about the size of the standard tipper can that the city offers. And I think you said that there were smaller sizes that are still tippable. And I think you may have even indicated the city could acquire those for people who wanted to buy them directly from the city. Is that true?
Yes.
Well, and this code does not dictate that anybody has to purchase a typical mechanism from the city, correct?
No.
This is just saying that if you put a can out, it must have the tipper mechanism on it.
Mayor, I know that part of that, you had said from the beginning that you got tippable cans, new ones, and you didn't want to have to get, be required to get the city one, which is great. I'm glad to have the flexibility. It's just that for me, I might want to buy it from the city because it's easier for me than going out and getting it myself. I just want to make sure that for those people who want to buy it from the city, that 2 sizes will be offered. And I'm also really glad to hear Jean say that this isn't going to go into effect for some months, because I do think people are going to have to be educated probably more than once about the change in policy.
So is the city going to offer sizes? Yes.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other commissioners?
Yeah, just, I guess it's standard boilerplate, but on the draft change, lines 29 and 30 just state the ordinance shall take effect immediately upon its adoption. And we had a discussion that that's not the case. So for voting time during the regular meeting, if either that could be altered or removed, or just a correct date indicated.
Good catch. Thank you, Commissioner. Anything else? Any other commissioners? If not, we'll go to the members of the public. Mike Strange, anything on the definition of waste container?
Yeah, really, just a question first, and if, depending on what the answer is, will indicate what my follow-up may be. This then requires that all trash that is placed at the curb must be in that container and can't be in a bag that's placed out that morning, in addition to.
No, this only says if you put out a trash can, it must be a typical trash can.
So you still could put out the next morning if you had just happened to have some excess trash.
That's on our.
That's a separate item.
Okay, that's what we're
but
separating those out.
This vote on this one thing would just define our waste containers.
All I can say is fantastic. In my youth, I worked on the back of a trash truck, and if you've ever actually done it, you know the problems associated with exactly what you said. So I support this completely.
Use of bags is a future topic today. Okay, we haven't gotten there yet. Rick Perry, anything?
No, I support this measure. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. With that, we'll go to item number 2 of proposed amendments to the Chapter 227 relating to the collection of refuse and collection times, specifically Section 227-9. Can you put that up on the screen? And Jane, if you would, articulate.
Okay, so this is the only part of the code that says you can actually put out bags. So the change here would be to eliminate the time frame for putting out bags, because then it would just say you can only put out trash containers. This is the one that will vote. This vote would be the one that decides whether or not people can put out a bag on the side of the street for pickup. I'll read it to you what we are going to remove. So we're going to remove, or would like to remove, or shall place a refuse in disposable containers not earlier than 5 a.m. on collection day. So it would just read, if we remove that, the owner or occupier of any dwelling shall place refuse in waste containers along the curb in front of such lot not earlier than 6 p.m. on the day prior to collection day, in order that it may be conveniently collected by the city. All waste containers shall be removed from the city property no later than 9 p.m. on collection day. Any violation of this section is declared a civil offense pursuant to Chapter 126 of the Municipal Code of the City of Rehoboth Beach. So by removing that one sentence about disposable containers, nowhere else in the code does it say you can put out a disposable container, and that would eliminate the use of just putting out a garbage bag.
Thank you, Jane. And this is one I've articulated before, gives me a little heartburn. I've mentioned before that I know some citizens, especially singles and couples, that put out less than one bag of refuse. So I'm tending to leave this alone because it does accommodate loose bag trash. However, I also recognize that the use of tippers helps save backs from the personnel that have to empty it. Therefore, I would be more receptive to leaving this alone, however, with a caveat that if you put out loose bags, it cannot be more than pick a number, one bag, one full bag, cannot be more than 2 bags of 30 pounds or something, because that segues into a conversation about multiple bags, not in carts, for some of the high rises that we've talked about before. And it put a burden on them and our personnel to have to go pick up 50 bags if we continue to allow bags. Whereas with my proposition, we leave bags alone that accommodates 1 or 2 lightweight bags for people, but does not accommodate some of the big entities to put out 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 bags at a time. Anybody, any other commissioners?
Yeah, I do.
Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, first of all, I think if we're trying to educate people or try to get them moved over to using the barrels whenever they can and away from bags, we ought to change the image on the city's homepage for the trash recycling and pickup schedules, which is a large bag next to the schedule listing. So maybe we ought to have a photo there of a barrel. Anyway, I have a real problem with this for two reasons. One, and I'm glad to hear you say, Mayor, that you'd like to leave the disposables. I would as well, because on day one, if we do away with disposable bags, it turns a large number of people into non-code compliance, which runs the risk of, elsewhere in this section, there's a fine listed of like $100 a day. Either that, or it obligates them to effectively double their trash costs by contracting with a valet service because they can't be there on pickup days. So this was a problem that when it was last discussed in 2016, this was the solution, to allow the disposable bags to go out morning of, which gives them less opportunity to be broken into by animals. And I know that some people probably don't comply with that, and that's where our enforcement comes in. But to do away with it entirely is just too much of a disadvantage for people.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other commissioners? Commissioner LeGree, go ahead.
I agree with you, Mayor, and I agree with Commissioner Gay. And back in the day when they were putting them out on Saturday, and it would be 2 or 3, 4 days sometimes, depending on if there's a holiday, before anything got picked up. I went along with this. I thought that people leaving their bags out for 2 or 3 days was not advisable. But since we have tightened things up, I almost never see a bag that's been broken into by a fox or a raccoon or something. I'm sure it happens, but I just don't see it. And I think we're using our discretion to use disposable bags, and we're just 2 at our house, and we don't make much trash, and 15-pound bag is just fine for 90% of the time. But we have a trash can that we can put out if we want to, but we just put bags out. So I think we should keep the bags, and I don't think that we should make any penalty for using them. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anybody else? Commissioner Sharp?
I just want to articulate that I want to keep disposables and single bags of trash, but I am very curious of what our enforcement on all of these issues is really, honestly like.
Well, we do the best we can, Commissioner. That's what I can tell you. We have ample coverage now. We have a full status in our building and licensing department, and we do the best we can with enforcement. We go out on a regular basis and advise folks first of the ordinance and take it from there. So it's as adequate as I can say it is for a small town here and the personnel that we have.
Thank you. Any further comments from the commissioners?
Mayor, I just want to agree with keeping the disposable bags, but requiring the tipper for the trash cans.
Thank you. Anybody else? Commissioner Gossett?
Yes, also, I support keeping the bags. And I would just ask that, I know, again, this is a separate conversation for the December workshop, but if the solicitor could also, because we had some perhaps suggested changes in 22724 in the definition of or description of owner, occupier, residence. The first line of this also talks about owner, occupier, any given dwelling. So again, we kind of have an inconsistency of the language appearing in both of these statutes. So I would just, I don't know when we'll get to agree on a fee for residential collection definition, but whichever that is, it should, I would think, be consistent with 227.9.
Got it, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. With that, we'll go to members of the public. This is relating to the collection of refuse and collection times 227-9. Mike Strange, anything further?
Yes, one quick question is, unless I misunderstood it, we previously defined waste container, which eliminated in that one phrase that you couldn't use a bag at all.
No, so the waste container and this are two separate. So the waste container definition used to be a container that was metal or plastic and had a lid and all of that. So we took out all the stuff that was anything other than tippable for the waste container. Actually, bags or disposable containers is defined separately in the code. I don't have that page of the code up
Right,
here
but
with
in the
me.
one that's recommended,
Now,
is-
the very first one we talked about eliminated waste containers that
Right.
don't have tipper mechanisms.
so okay, so it's specific to that, so it
That's
doesn't
all.
carry over.
You
Okay.
can't have waste container that doesn't have a tipper mechanism.
And separate and distinct is you may put out a bag according to the regulations.
The first one, yes. So
If-
the second one is the elimination of bags. They're two different votes.
Okay.
Um,
And I
do we
can-
keep bags? Yes or
Right.
no? Is our trash can?
I think subject to what the mayor pointed out is in terms of weight limit with regard to the bag is appropriate. And as opposed to what Commissioner Legree said, if you drive around early enough or late enough, particularly in the summer, you'll see a massive number of bags are out there that are picked out, not necessarily by foxes, but definitely by birds and very large birds, and the debris then being spread all over. So it is something that's really a question of enforcement more than anything else. And if citizens call it in, I can say that, in fact, the city does respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Walter, anything?
First of all, Walter Birmingham, 123 Untitled Avenue. I completely concur with what you're trying to do. There are so many people that have a bag, and there's different kind of bags, and we've got trouble enough defining cans, containers, etc. But the north side of town has got a lot of animals moving, and there is this year been so many more breaking into the bags by animals. I mean, somebody doesn't open them. And if a person wants to use a lesser bag, buy it at the grocery store, if they can have a container, and if that container can be tippable, I'm in favor of that. But there needs to be a methodology, because there's too many people that they put 3 times the volume of the can in and on the can, and then it ends up all over. As you may know, we see it very often on the north side of town. Public Works does a very good job of going around, literally tagging bags that have leaves in them in black plastic, and they say, we're not going to pick them up. And that's the right thing to do. And why not be able to do that with trash also? So if you have non-compliant bags, tag them, but there also needs to be somewhere in the process, the communication, and it's got to change from time to time, about the city's yard where most days that you can dump trash and give the person an alternative. So otherwise, you're doing a good job.
Thank you, Walter. I would place a bet that the majority of bags broken open are because they're put out the previous day in contravention to our code. Rick Perry, do you have anything on this comment? If not, we'll go to the next item, which is 27 22711 relating to the collection of yard waste and recyclables and collection times. Jean, go ahead and explain this one.
Okay, so this one is loose leaf pickup. Right now in our code, it doesn't say what days of the week we pick it up. It says that we pick it up from October 1st to May 14th each year. One of the supporting documents is the table for loose leaf pickup. We want to move that from starting October 1st to November 1st because there just isn't that many loose leaves to pick up in October. It's still at more of the summertime tonnage that we're picking up in October, and then it jumps to 96 tons on an average in November. So starting that November 1st. And then the second change is to actually, instead of having May 14th as a date we stop, actually saying the second Friday in May, because May 14th can be a Saturday and Sunday, and then there's confusion and people are calling in because they put it out there on Saturday. Why wasn't it picked up by May 14th? We don't work on Saturday and Sundays for loose leaf pickup, so it needs to be a solid Friday as the last day, so we get rid of that confusion of the weekend days with it being May 14th.
Thank you, Jean. Any questions of this, the two changes?
I think this is okay. But just reading it completely, and again, I turn to the city solicitor for advisement on this. On line 26, based on a previous discussion about the cost of the container, we say is placed within a city-owned and furnished yard waste container. If we're selling it, the city doesn't own it any longer. So, in my opinion, but that may be better clarification by the city solicitor.
I think we need to check that, because my recollection in the old days is that we charged for the yard waste container, but the city retained ownership of it. Do you have a recollection?
The city does retain ownership.
So they're renting the container then, or I'm not clear.
Yeah. I think that's
something that may not answer it today, but that's definitely something we need to look into. Thank you. Anything else, Commissioner Gossett?
Not at this time.
Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll go to the members of the public. This has to do again with 227-11. Mike, nothing. Walter, nothing. Rick, anything?
No, Mayor.
Thank you very much. With that, we will go to the last proposed amendment change specific to 227-24 relating to billing cycle and clarifications. Would like to make note that Commissioner Gossett's done his homework and has provided a red line of some proposed changes, but I asked him to hold off on that till the next discussion because it has to do with the fee structure. So we're only going to address one particular part of this code right now, and yes, likely there'll be changes later, but there's a timeline on here, right? Jean, you want to explain, please?
Yes, so we only want to talk about the couple of sentences that say when we bill these fees out, not talk about the fees themselves, because that's going to be a separate issue. And we do need to decide on this month. We are already in a little bit of a time crunch because we didn't decide last month, because this is a computer change and a form change for our bills. So we do have to work with Munis, our program that we do this through, and they need to make us a new, so we customize the program to do it the way we do it. We need to uncustomize everything to go back to the way the program really wants to run. So that is the push for, we need to decide that this month, or we have to leave it alone until after next billing year. And the only change here, so I'll read the part that's changing. So it said fees will be divided equally into quarterly billings for each fiscal year, commencing July 1 of each year. Bills will be payable for 30 days after the bill, and a penalty of 1.5% per month will be added to said bills after the due date until paid. That is all the wording that I want to add. All we took out was that the bills would be mailed July 1st of each year, and that they're payable by August 31st, and that the penalty starts on September 1st. So we're dividing it into 4 quarterly bills. And we're not starting until July 1st because trash has already been paid for through June 30th. And the July 1st year runs concurrent with our tax year. So trash and tax ran concurrent together. That's why we're going to keep it July 1st. I did hear some discussion in the last meeting about changing it to a fiscal year. If we did that, I would have to prorate every single bill by hand when we bill it next year, which would be a lot of work. So I would really like to keep it running on the year that it runs right now, concurrent with the tax year. It will affect the money coming in like it did the business licenses that we changed 2 years ago, I believe, where we had that 6 months where it wasn't, we had been taking everything in June, and now we're taking it in for business licenses in December. So this will spread it out over the year. We won't take all the money in August. So it will have that same effect for 1 year where the money is coming in differently and it'll look a little different on the budget.
Any questions for Jean from the commissioners? Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, so it takes, this software change, it'll take 7 months to get that changed?
So
that's why you have to have it now?
It's going to take us 3 to 4 months just to get the form changed because we have to go through their forms, people, to make changes, to test it out in the test environment, to put it into the live. It is a process that we really were supposed to start with them last month if we were going to make the change.
Because I have to tell you, the discomfort I have with this, so you're basically asking us to vote next week on this with just these changes, with the expectation that there will be other changes after that, right?
Correct.
I'm uncomfortable with that.
Well,
I'm uncomfortable with doing it in 2 pieces because it's like, if we vote on it with this change, it's like we're agreeing with everything else that's in the wording when we're not. Because I have a lot of problems with some of the other wording.
no, I disagree. You know, we're in there, we're actively looking at it. She explained the reasons. Do you want to take a stab at the reasons why this needs to be done?
Well, again, I think, Jean handled it appropriately, and we've been talking about it. It's just a matter of the software update and what we need to have the forms ready. So that's the only reason we're bringing it forward.
And the vote is to address the specific changes there. And again, Commissioner Gossett will be having additional changes, and we all might have additional changes ourselves, but we are specifically voting on one set of amendments that's in front of us. Any other commissioners? If not, we'll go to the public. Mike Strange, do you have anything? This is referencing to changing to quarterly billing.
Yes, sir. I think quarterly billing is absolutely a very good move, and especially in light of the discussion we're going to have later with regard to the finances and how that may and will change. Thank you.
Thank you. Walter? Rick Perry, anything you'd like to say on finances?
I also think that quarterly billing is a good idea.
Thank you. With that, we'll finalize. Are there any other comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Legree, unmute yourself.
The most important thing we've said all day was said by Rick Perry and Mike Strange. We got to get the calendar out. We got to publicize it. We got to have it for everybody for their refrigerator. The most common question I get asked from renters on both sides of us is today the day for this? Is today the day for that? And we've got to publicize that. And I think every other week's just fine, except we just have to make it so that make a brochure to tape onto your refrigerator for every landlord to send out to their renters, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, we'll close out this topic and look forward to conducting votes at the November regular meeting, and look forward even greater with this not being on the agenda in December. With that, thank you very much. Thank you, Gene. You're dismissed, and we appreciate all your input and efforts on this. Thank you, Sharon, too. With that, we're going to go to the next item of old business, which is discussion with CTC Inc., the city's wireless consultant, on the recommended amendments to Chapter 270 zoning, specifically to Section 270-46.1.2, wireless communications facilities, and including the design guidelines. A reminder that we have wireless ordinance in front of us that is within Chapter 270, the zoning code. And the process to amend the zoning code, of course, is that we have to, at some point after discussion and we're satisfied, vote to go to public hearing through a resolution, and then conduct the public hearing and then conduct the vote. Also want to be mindful that in addition to the wireless ordinance, makes reference to a design manual, and the design manual is a separate item. I intend today to just talk about and focus on the wireless ordinance and the proposed amendments that were introduced at our last meeting. We have Julie Elias here with us of CTC, who are again going to go through the code to see if anybody has any questions, because again, I would like to head toward a vote to go to public hearing at the November regular meeting, if we are comfortable with that. As far as the design manual goes, that's something that I want to do as a step number 2. And so we're not going to address that right now. I think, we have enough to handle. With that, I'm going to go to Julie, if you'd like to review some of the proposals and entertain questions. And also at some point, commissioners, those of you that are chairs of your committees, if you would articulate your committee's point or perspective or opinions, if you have those at this point. I believe, Jay, Commissioner Legree, you do. And the Environment Committee may or may not at this point. So with that, Julie, let's turn it over to you, please.
Absolutely. Hi, and thank you all for having me back again. As Mayor Mills had just mentioned, the revisions that we proposed to both the design guidelines and the ordinance are in front of you. At the moment, we're going to talk about just the ordinance revisions, of which there are just one very minimal change at this time. The proposal that we suggested is that towards the very top of your document at line approximately 111, I think that is, to add the definition of what a new wireless facility would be considered. The reason to do this is so that as you look ahead towards the actual processing of applications, the ways, the documents that you require be submitted to install a new structure where none exists, or to justify why a brand new structure needs to be built, as opposed to requiring that a carrier co-locate their antennas on something that already exists, be it a utility pole, a light pole, something like that. Having that definition of a new structure, a new installation, separate from any of the other types of installations that I've just mentioned, will help you in terms of the overall process of applications and processing the permits moving forward. Other than that, the ordinance itself is in really, really strong shape, as I know I've mentioned before at previous times that I've joined you all. The rest of the revisions that we've suggested really are within that design manual for both technical and aesthetic specifications, looking ahead to future meetings and future discussions on those.
Julie, do you think that that one recommended change would basically make sense to any of the vendors?
Absolutely. I don't think that the addition of that definition of a new installation or new application is going to change anything in terms of how a carrier would or, I can't imagine that they would have any opposition to that. It's simply more of a procedural point for your team or our team, whoever is processing applications moving forward, helping to make that procedure and that process more smooth, looking ahead to when that time comes.
Thank you.
Any other questions I can answer?
Anything from the commissioners? I would like to acknowledge that we've got correspondence from resident Mike Strange. He is listed to speak, so maybe we'll hear from him later. I will remind him that we do have that letter. It won't be embedded into the agenda until after this meeting because it was received late-ish, I suppose. But it is something that has some comments in it that I think are worth review and analysis by Julie and CTC. Commissioners, again, the goal is to try to move this forward. The next step would be when we're comfortable to adopt a resolution to go to public hearing. So the earliest, if we acted on adopting a resolution at the November regular meeting, then the earliest we would vote to consider this would be at the December regular meeting, right? And so it's what is the pleasure of the commissioners? I'm comfortable with what's been proposed. Perhaps we can pause here and go to the two committees. Jay, if you could just reiterate, you indicated, I believe, your committee was fine with the proposal. You want to do it in your own words?
Yes, we are. We're fine with the proposed to change that Julie has suggested in line 111. We didn't even think about it when we went. We didn't even know that we needed that, but now that it's there, we do need that. So that's great. And I also agree with your plan of action, which is to get the ordinance worked out and spend some time on the design manual, because she has really made a lot of recommendations for the design manual, and some of them really have teeth in them. So I agree with that, and my committee also agrees that the ordinance looks great. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, I appreciate that. Thank your committee for the review. I just want to clarify and make sure that I understand that your committee and including you agree to all the proposed amendments to the wireless ordinance, correct?
Yeah, we didn't. Well, we haven't talked about the design manual.
I'm just talking about the wireless ordinance proposed amendments.
Yes, indeed. We said looks like the same as it always was, and it looks okay. And if you recall, when she first briefed us, she said those very things. She said your ordinance looks great, and then she talked about the design manual. But yes. Yeah, we're good to go on that. We don't have any recommendations, but we're going to have to talk about the design manual.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner. Ed, as you're the brand new chair of the Environment Committee, have they had a chance to do it, or do you intend for them to do it? I know Heather Metz, I think, has been your spokesperson for a while. Are you going to ask her to submit anything or to speak in front of your Environment Committee?
Yeah, Mayor, I've not yet had a chance to have a meeting with the Environment Committee yet to look at this. It is will be on the agenda for the next meeting.
Well, are we in a time dilemma here because the regular voting meeting is what, November 19th? Is that correct?
Yes.
I personally don't think so, Mayor. I think the Environment Committee is going to be much more focused on the design manual. I personally think the changes to the ordinance will not cause any questions or concerns.
All right. Thank you very much. And what's the pleasure of the commissioners? Shall we put on the November regular meeting, adoption of a resolution to go to public hearing in this matter.
I would say yes to that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, I would also agree to that. I do have one question, and I don't know if it would go along with that, but has there been any further discussion about the management of the application process? I know that Julie's company does offer that service, but I haven't really heard anything more about whether we are going to engage in that or not.
No, Commissioner, we haven't yet discussed that.
Will that be on a future agenda or?
Yes, it should be.
Thank you. Commissioner Legree, go ahead.
Yes, as I review her checklist and start thinking about those things, it seems really like if the building and license, if the city manager would even like to consider that, there would be some very appropriate things to put on a portal and have them screen the applications and get everything all buttoned up and hand it off to building and licensing and say, here, we've looked for all the problems and got everything all squared away. It's yours to go forward with if you want to. But that's something I was going to suggest along with the design manual. We could talk about it at any time. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sharp, please.
And Mayor, I was sitting here going back through my notes, and the environmental committee and the boardwalk committees were really only asked to look at the design manual, and it didn't really include the ordinance. It's great that Jay's committee did, but the expectation was really only for the design manual.
Thank you.
If that helps the environmental group.
Well, Ed indicated that they were more interested in the design manual, so.
Right.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gay?
I just have a question. It's partly a question for the city solicitor as well as for Julie, and that is that the design manual is incorporated by reference into the ordinance, right? So it's enforceable as part of the ordinance, even though it's not in the written ordinance. Is that right?
That is correct, Commissioner. It's, I just had this question recently. It's section 270-46.1.2C10 that does incorporate the design manual.
Okay, great. And then remind me then the timing of finalizing the design manual.
I'm going to be putting it on a future agenda. I don't know if I can squeeze it on the December 6th agenda or not, because I think we have a full agenda. So as soon as we can, I intend to keep it moving forward.
Do we anticipate that there'll be applications that come in the meantime? And if so, what are they evaluated under?
We have not heard of any applications coming in. We haven't been notified really for several months.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Legree.
This has really been puzzling to me also. I'm not sure what's going on. You remember how we had anticipated that there would be a real push to get something going for this summer, and we missed the last summer. I just don't know what's happening. There are some bandwidths that are having some real problems, as Frank Cooper brought up to our attention several months ago. There have been some bandwidths that are having some real problems with the global positioning and therefore the navigation systems of some of the airlines.
Yes.
I don't know whether that's what's holding everything up. I just don't know. It may be that they're not selling enough bandwidth that they had anticipated, but something's going on. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? If not, we'll go to the public. Mike Strange, you might have something to say. Remember, we got your letter, so you don't have to read it verbatim.
Does Julie have the letter?
No, and there's no camera on you, so you can look wherever you want.
Okay. Julie doesn't have it. This relates directly to the...
Yeah, I think I forwarded it to her. Yeah.
Okay. Is the incorporation into the definitions list of BATI, which is the best available technology economically achievable. And that's used in a variety of standards and methods in a whole bunch of areas, and only recently starting to be used because of 5G, essentially because of why and how the industry implemented 5G in communities such as ours, because they were able to do a lot of things that otherwise wouldn't have been permitted, quote, in the old days, which was only 5 years ago, when all of this was still under the control of the Public Utility Commission. And the Public Utility Commission, except for tariffs, was no longer involved anymore with the rollout under the regulations under 2018 by the Federal Communications Commissions with regard to the 3 criteria that were applied to the rollouts and how they were done. And so the effect of that was to remove a layer of intervention before it ever got to a municipality. And the reason there was such this speed related to the installations was competitive advantage. And all municipalities were essentially off guard. They didn't even realize what was happening. Because of most municipalities, with regard to their mayors and their city managers, unless you were an expert in physics and RF, you really didn't know what was going on. And so those organizations took advantages of the lack of knowledge. What Julie has done has codified in this area and made it much more difficult, but still achievable. But now municipalities are utilizing the rules to their benefit, and the applicants, the 5G community, now have to pay attention to it. The reason I'm recommending that the best available technology economically achievable be put in the definitions area is this is the one protection, quite frankly, that covers you in all aspects of whatever the application, whatever embodiment it takes, irrespective if you didn't even have a design manual. It provides you with protection because they are forced to do best available technology economically achievable, which is defined as best available technology economically achievable is the incorporation of top-of-the-line, state-of-the-art technology, which may be more expensive than a lesser cost option, but does not result in an unreasonable prohibition. That meets the FCC requirements. The other part, before you even, if you didn't even have, as Julius pointed out, we have a very good wireless or 5G code. Even if you didn't have this, we still have the CDP. And the reason that's so important is the CDP calls out viewscapes as one of the critical elements of what is Rehoboth Beach. The CDP, as Glenn pointed out repeatedly, has the force and effect of law. And you are, because it's been previously published and it's been out there, you have the ability to use the CDP. Even if you didn't have a wireless ordinance, it applies to wireless installations. That's what's so crucially important. What this does is fortify it. So what I'm recommending, since we're not talking about the design manual, is it's critically important within the context of our current existing code that we add in the definition section 270.4, best available technology economically achievable, and Julie may wish to play with this or Glenn may wish to modify it, that it be incorporated at that level. And then at each point in the existing code where, and I'll read this out directly, add the shortcut acronym BATI as an adjective to each of the technical embodiments in our code that describes any physically engineered construct. Now, what does this do? Technology is constantly changing. Years ago, it changed very slow. Now it changes very fast in this particular area. What this does, it doesn't give a telecommunications provider any place to hide. And it's fully compliant with the 3 provisions that are required under the FCC with regard to 5G. It also is fully compliant with the 2018 wireless code in the state of Delaware. So I think it's critically important that those things be incorporated into our existing code. Then separately, in the design manual, as Julie is recommending, that goes into a series of very specific details. But if you put BATI in your basic beginning code in the definitional area, it really goes a long way to protect you so you're not blindsided, because you can always ask, is this the best available technology that's economically achievable? And they have to tell you the truth. If they don't, then it becomes fraud and a whole nother issue. So from that standpoint, I think we should go along with Julie's recommendations, with the one that's in there, but with this addition in the code specifically. And then later, within the design manual, those other things that need to be discussed. With regard to the question that was posed by Commissioner Legree, that, gee, we were expecting a lot more applications and things seem to have slowed down. The reason they've slowed down is not a function of Rehoboth Beach. In many municipalities, there have been many lawsuits that have been filed subsequently with regard to the particular applicants did not, in fact, provide all the appropriate information at the time that they did these things and violated other federal laws in the process. And so they're now reflective and looking at it. That doesn't mean they're slowing down and stopping in other areas. But around the United States, and particularly on the Eastern Seaboard, they're dealing with multiple lawsuits right now that are manifesting under the new rules, under the court order that was done in 2019 by the Ninth Circuit. So there's a lot of undercurrents going on right now that are external to Rehoboth, but are directly impacting the suppliers that supply and work with Rehoboth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Walter, anything on the 5 wireless? Rick Perry, anything on wireless? Specific to the proposed amendment to the wireless code? If not, we'll come back to him if he comes on. With that, commissioners, is there any further comment? Commissioner Legree, you're muted.
This seems like such an easy thing to do, as Mike was saying, and I can't see any downside. I think let's certainly consider that and get that in there as a definition and something we can refer back to and use it. So I would be really in favor of the suggestions that Mr. Strange made, and I'm going to reread his letter again. But this seems like a no-brainer.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And Julie has that letter, and we would ask her to analyze it, get back to us.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much. With that, I think our direction's set for the November 19th regular voting meeting. We will consider adopting a resolution to go to public hearing in this matter. With that, is there no further comment? I want to thank Julie for attending today and bid you adieu. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is discuss Sussex County's request to purchase a portion of the permitted daily average load allocation, an equivalent of 2 million gallons per day of the city's ocean outfall capacity. As I mentioned, introducing this meeting, I have invited them to come to a special meeting on Monday, November 15th at 2 o'clock, in which case we will have provided them a heads up on questions to be asked by the commissioners, as well as any questions submitted by the members of the public. And I would continue to solicit, as I have not heard back from all the commissioners, and I'm sure we've got more feedback to hear from the members of the public. Just by the way, all the correspondence from the public is being put on our portal so that there's a folder so that everybody can access it. With that, if anybody wants to contribute now, they're certainly welcome to, but I would also understand if the preference is to defer to the special meeting. And my expectation would be that the county would make a presentation, and we would allow for questions and answers. Then the city at some point would respond to questions and answers directed at them, and we go from there to discussion among the commissioners with additional public input. Would anybody like to say anything today? Hearing none, we'll go to the public. Mike, do you want to defer till the special meeting? Yes. Walter, anything? Nope. Rick Perry, are you back on yet?
He's not on the call.
He's gone. All righty. Thank you very much. Thank you with that. And with that, we'll move to the only one item of new business. This is a little premature, but I wanted to share it with you anyhow. And that is to discuss the Planning Commission request to amend the city code to establish the date prior to a planning commission by which the applicant must make any written submissions to the Planning Commission. I think this is something, a situation that's been pointed out that's common to all committees, commissions, and boards. And that is especially those that have authority, like the commissioners for our permits of compliance or Parks and Shade Tree Commission that take on appeals, that applicants are submitting needed materials later and later in the game, up to the day of a meeting. And the Planning Commission wants something codified in the code that dictates things have to be received a certain amount, a sufficient amount prior to the meeting. Glenn, do you want to?
That's basically it, Mayor. There are some provisions within the subdivision code that already mandate times by which certain things should be filed, but we have been noticing an uptick in receiving substantial filings within hours or within a day of the meeting with just nobody, given the schedules the way they are today, would have any ability to review it in any way that would make them knowledgeable about the project coming into a meeting just several hours later. So the Planning Commission thought it wise to kind of set a date or a time by which, and they haven't given you any recommendation, but they asked that you take it up and consider it.
Yeah, actually, Mike Bryan, the chair, sent me something, and it's just a rough draft. That perhaps it's something to go to you to help draft a codify that they wanted to receive things at least 15 days prior to the next scheduled meeting. So that's something that we'll want to take up with them. And also individually with the Parks and Shade Tree Commission, because I don't believe they have deadline. Board of Adjustment, I believe, does have submittal deadlines within their own rules, so it's not codified. So one thing we may want to do is check those three groups, and check the Board of Commissioners with permit of compliance submissions and see if we all want to have the same date of a deadline prior to a meeting. Going forward. So anyhow, I just wanted to share that with you and receive any comments before we move forward with it. Anybody commenting?
Yes. I totally support this request by the Planning Commission. As being part of the Planning Commission many years ago, we did face the same issues, but it has become more and more apparent that really substantial and substantive materials are being presented the day before the meeting, in addition to what has previously been presented, and no one has the time to react to it, of the members of the commission and also to the members of the public to be able to review this information. So I think, I also asked the solicitor focus on the chairman of the Planning Commission immediately, but if we could take a larger view of the four commissions, the Board of Adjustments, Planning Commission, Parks and Shade Tree, and Mayor and Commissioners, as Mayor you had mentioned, is there to make it all consistent in what we currently offer as deadlines. Currently, the Board of Adjustments, to become placed on the agenda, if you will, there's a 30-day period that you have to be in advance of. With the Planning Commission, it's 28 days. Again, these are both within the rules and operating procedures of the Board of Adjustments and Planning Commission, not codified in any way. Then with the Board of Adjustments, for additional materials to be submitted, there's a 10-day minimum. The Planning Commission has 0 at this time. They're asking for a 15-day. So I think if we could look at this holistically, to keep all of the days of initial applications for appearing on the docket or on the agenda, and then a similar equal number of days for the 4 commissions, so that when an applicant submits something, it's not like, well, what are you submitting it to? Who is it from? Because there's different deadlines. I think if we were to approach this all as 30 days and 15 days to this and codify this information so that it is enforceable. And this should also look at all preliminary reviews, major subdivisions, minor subdivisions, petitionings, and site plan reviews and concept reviews, so that it covers all aspects of materials that are being presented to the various commissions that we have there. And also to talk about perhaps looking also into when an applicant asks to withdraw or to postpone a hearing, that materials for that then have to be reposted, re-advertised, et cetera, and to look at really a fee structure for that, because that is not only the cost of advertising, but also the cost of city staff time to be able to do that. So I know that's a lot to look at, and I think to focus right on the 15-day requirement that the Planning Commission is asking about, to act on that as soon as we can, but that we do need to look at all of this as one holistic package. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good points. Anybody else? So there's,
Yeah.
so there's more work to do, obviously, but I just wanted to advise you of it. Commissioner Gay, please.
Yeah. First of all, I totally agree with Commissioner Gossett. I think we should standardize it as much as we can. And I'm glad this issue has come up, because I realize now that there are a lot of holes in the code with regard to timing. One question and then a suggestion is that I don't know, is the public notice the same period for every one of these commissions already, or is that something else that should be looked at?
Well, Commissioner, anything that requires a public hearing requires a 15-day notice. Everything else is 7 days. So those notice periods, I think, are pretty much in a line across the city based on state law. But something worth looking at as well to see if there is some, but I think they're pretty well in line.
What's nice about the time frame that Chairman Bryan has proposed is that I think it would be nice to tie in the deadline for submission of all materials with the timing of the public notice, because then the public notice goes out and we have everything already. You know, the public has everything to look at, and those dates are coordinated. I think that's good. But also along the lines of something Commissioner Gossett said about the fees, because there have been several instances recently where an applicant has asked for their case to be continued sort of at the last minute, and public notices do have to be reissued, not only the newspaper notices, but the notices to all the neighbors. I wonder if maybe that should be part of the application fee process, you know, whether or not they change the timing or not, just that the costs associated with notices should be borne by the applicants from the get-go. I just throw that. I don't know what those costs are, but whatever they are, it seems like the applicant should bear them and not the taxpayers.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you very much. With that, we'll close that topic, although we can go to the members of the public. Mike Strange, do you have anything to say?
Yes.
And are you speaking on behalf of yourself or the Planning Commission?
I was just going to say that. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, who happens to be a Planning Commission member starting my 10th year. And the degree and number and depth of applications that we are seeing, you can't in any rational way review them in a few hours before the meeting, since these are multi-page documents, in many cases involving a multitude of engineering drawings that in most cases were generated in CAD. And the ones that are submitted to the city initially, when you look at the website, they're too small to even understand what they're saying. And so you have to request printed copies, which then Ann has to make, and then you pick up the next day. It's a very, very difficult situation. It puts the commissioners and the city at a severe disadvantage, especially when these documents were created in many cases months or weeks in advance, done by professionals that are full-time and being paid. And all of us as volunteers have to review them all, and to review them to the depth, to a moral certainty that you can be really sure of what the facts and evidence are on both sides. you can't do it in 5 hours, or in some cases, you can't do it in a week. And a few of the applications we've seen recently, which were massive, and in some cases have resulted in litigation, you need the time to help prevent that on behalf of the city. So yes, by all means, I agree with all of the commissioners and Glenn's observations. These need to be relooked at again, and I support fully the chair of the Planning Commission in requesting that more time be permitted for us to review things based on an applicant's submission. Thank you.
Thank you. Walter?
Are we still under 8A?
Yes.
Thank you. Walter Birmingham, 123 Henlopen Avenue. I very much appreciate this. In the past, I used to come to planning commission meetings and many different things and see at the last moment, after there was an interval and items were presented ahead of time, and then the presenters came out with 8 or 10 copies of a map or charts or something. And I will question the use of the word written submissions, but the items are never made available, maybe these days with the electronic boards, but it's copies ought to be available, if nothing else, after the fact, left here on the table. But otherwise, we don't see what you're presented with and sometimes are asked to vote upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Rick Perry, I think, is still off. All righty. With that, that ends new business. We'll go to commissioner announcements and comments. Anything from the commissioners?
I have something, Mayor, but I think I'll save it for reviewing our future meeting dates.
All righty. Well, we're reviewing future meeting dates. I'll let you know that there is FOIA and ethics training tomorrow, Tuesday, November 9th at 11 a.m. It's targeting the Board of Commissioners, Parks and Shade Tree Commission, Planning Commission, and Board of Adjustment. However, the public is invited. It will be streamed live and also recorded, of course. With that, the next special meeting was about the county initiative, and that, as I mentioned earlier, is Monday, November 15th at 2 o'clock, where the Sussex County reps have been invited to attend that and participate with us. Commissioner Sharp?
I want to speak on behalf of the public for a minute about the number of upcoming meetings that I believe all the commissioners are certainly aware of at this time. A good example is what's happening next week, November 15th, November 17th, November 19th. And between next week and the end of February, I'm personally aware of 23 meetings that have been floated for the commissioners' time. My question is, how do we be considerate of our public on not only mayor and commissioners meetings, but the schedule of overlaying that with the schedule of potential CDP, public input, etc. I'm just getting a bit lost in how do we go about, or maybe I'm missing what we're doing, not just the 7-day notice, which is required, but to tell folks in advance, just like you do any other big events, if you've got a particular interest in outdoor dining or any other specific meeting, we will have a meeting coming up, let's say December 14th on that particular topic. So I'm just a bit lost in how we are making sure our public, especially during holidays, which is a source not only for me of irritation, however, it may be necessary, but in some cases, it seems to me it could have been avoided. But the bottom line for me at this time is, how do we make the public aware of what I believe we all already anticipate through the end of February?
Well, I anticipate that for each of the special meetings, which will have special topics, which are designed to devote time only to the single topics, that besides compliance with FOIA and 7 days notice, we would also be doing a press release for those, because some of these topics are very, very important, such as streetscape, such as outdoor dining, such as the county initiative.
And I think, Mayor, when you actually see it all in one place of what the expectation is, November, December, January, February, it's quite overwhelming. And I think the public needs to be able to manage. They all have lives, as we all do as well, to try to insert themselves where it's most important.
Well, then if you want to pick out which topics we should put off or just take off our plate, we have a lot on our plate, admittedly, a lot, and there's time constraints to them. So I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying to give you all the notice. I've polled you all. I'm not scheduling meetings when, for instance, you can't be there for the entire week, to try to accommodate the most number of commissioners as I can at each meeting. So I'm doing my best, and we do have a lot on our plate. If we could take
Mayor,
each.
I'm not looking for a debate. I am looking for how do we explain to the public what is coming just for their own personal time management, all of our meetings and the CDP. How do we reach out effectively so folks know what's going on?
Well, I can work with Lynn and probably update that calendar that I sent to you all. However, understand there may not be a lot of specificity in there. If I knew, by example, that we only needed one streetscape meeting, then the very next meeting I might schedule for outside dining. And if I knew outside dining was only 2 meetings long, then the very next meeting I would schedule the trees in there. I just don't know the duration of our discussions, So I have in my mind that we will be doing these in certain sequences to the greatest efficiency that we can, utilizing time. But that's what I can offer you right now. Anything else, Commissioner Sharp?
No, I hear what you're saying. I'll pass for the moment, and you can go to Commissioner Bennett, I believe.
Sure, Commissioner Bennett.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I guess to Commissioner Sharp's point, I was surprised. I'm new, so I don't know if this is pro forma to have so many meetings in the 3 months. But I guess my one question would be on November 17th and December 7th, and you had mentioned the public restrooms and the Rehoboth Beach Patrol and the streetscape. While those are both really important issues and probably will take more than one meeting, they're both multi-million-dollar projects. My initial thought was, should we be discussing those before we hear from the Planning Commission and the CDP? Because a lot of these things aren't in a silo. And I think we're talking about some of these things in a very siloed approach, whereas without looking at the CDP, some of these topics I think we might be talking about too soon. That's just my opinion. I don't know if anybody else agrees.
Well, I do not agree, Commissioner, frankly, but respectfully. But the Wilmington-Baltimore streetscape is in the current CDP. I'm willing to carry it forward because I feel confident it will be in the next CDP. Now, do we know? No. And we may well have it in front of us before we have that meeting. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but
right.
What is it? November? I can't remember. Somewhere in November.
Yeah, the streetscape was December 7th.
Yeah, but late November would be when the next draft of the CDP is made available to the Board of Commissioners as well as the public. And I don't remember what date that happens. But
December 15th.
What November?
Well, Mayor, this
19th.
illustrates my point that even as commissioners, it's hard for us to keep it straight. What's coming, when is it coming, and how do we manage our time? So this is just an illustration of what I was trying to convey.
I don't know what more I can do other than publish the calendar and put it right in front of you, which is what I've done.
I'm not talking about me, Mayor Mills. I'm talking about our community that we want to have publicly involved in these subjects. I can read the chart that you sent me, trust me.
I've answered
What
you.
I'm not getting is any acknowledgement that our community should be engaged as much as possible. It's only my expectation, and I don't want to debate it anymore.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? If not, this meeting is adjourned at exactly noon. Thank you very much.